So the first film that is part of this Criterion Collection release is described as being from the year 1967, and the name of the filmmaker is the great filmmaker, artist extraordinaire Kira Muratova, and this is written by Leonid Zhukovsky and Kira Muratova. And also, in terms of its great cast, we have Nina Rusanova and Kira Muratova and Vladimir Vysotsky and others. And the name of this work, and again, I'm so sorry. Please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the language. I hope you can forgive me. But the name of this work is Korotki Vyshchetsky, or as it's known in English, Brief Encounters. And so, excuse me here. So, Brief Encounters. This is a powerhouse, dynamic film to the max. This is a film that is balancing many different parallel and seemingly contradictory, or potentially contradictory, story elements at once and varying perspectives at once, which is, I think, one of the bold, the fascinating things about this. This is a bold film. This is such a bold and dynamic and fresh film from Kira Muratova, and it's for those who might be watching Kira Muratova's films for the first time and maybe starting with this, which is cited as being her directorial debut in terms of feature film efforts. And some details are also emerging in some of the supplemental materials about that, which we'll talk about, and about her career, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the course of this this video discussion. But if one is going to start with Kira Muratova's works, and you're starting with Brief Encounters, my goodness, you are in for a treat. This is powerful cinema. This is brilliant cinema. It's inventive, it's creative, it's imaginative, it is very complex, and yet I think it's told in this way that is, I think, quite easy to understand. And its roots of accessibility, excuse me, I think are done in very welcoming brushstrokes. And so it's a testament to Kira Muratova's approach and style, and also a deeply personal one, and one that never loses sight of the emotional trajectories of the characters. And we understand, as I mentioned, there are so many characters here. But maybe let me take a step back and just mention to the two or three main characters that we can cite here: Valentina and Nadia and Maxim, but maybe we can focus on Valentina and Nadia. Well, let's first focus in on Valentina, and in the course of our endeavor to talk about the plot or story structure of Brief Encounters, this might aid in trying to illustrate just how wonderful the complex multi-mirroring nature, or the multi-fragmented nature of this film really is, and how brilliant it is in operating in terms of various spaces and times. So one of those spaces and times of this film, and one of the people, one of the main characters, is Valentina. This is the character portrayed by the writer and director, Kira Muratova, and we understand her almost immediately in the opening passages of the film. She seems to be a woman in Soviet Russia, who is the sort of contemporary times, who has many different stations and many different, say, self-acknowledged, say, roles, and perhaps even societal expectations associated with those roles as part of those varying stations, as well as her own inner workings, her own deeply personal story, which has a lot to do perhaps with those externally imposed roles, or perhaps has a lot to do against those externally imposed roles, and how that internal inner working storyline of hers has also to do with her relationship with Maxim. And also Nadia, as we will discover as the film unfolds. But when we speak about Valentina and her many roles in the film, as we see them expressed in Brief Encounters from the opening passages, we understand that she has a relationship with Maxim, who perhaps we will be introduced to later on in the film. There's also this sense of her role in terms of that relationship, and vis-a-vis maybe an expectation of domesticity. And we see this already immediately in various shots about the house, and, say, a very famous shot of dishes in the sink that are unwashed or are not clean. uh, and perhaps what might be said to be a kind of reticence on her part in perhaps cleaning those dishes. And the film makes a point to pronounce and to emphasize this a moment in the film. And also, we understand that that's not her only role. Another one of her roles is she's expected to write a speech because she has a prominent role in terms of sort of a prominent public role, public figure, and in terms of her government function or municipality government function or state function, she has a role that involves being in charge in a kind of bureaucratic, functionary way, being in charge of the sort of works and public works as they relate to specific lots of housing or specific properties of housing. And this is residential housing that we understand later that affects certain areas of the urban populace. And so they come to certain members of the population come to her with questions and also requests in terms of decision making on her part that will affect their lives, their daily lives that have to do with the public works. So she has many different roles and function. And oh yes, another one of those roles and functions is that of a kind of relationship vis-a-vis another one of the characters that we'll meet somewhat early on in the opening passages, and this is Nadia. And when Nadia is emerging into the film's folds, we understand that Nadia might be taking the place of some kind of uh, of of some kind of housework helper that is emerging somewhat abruptly at the household of Valentina. But we come to realize that Valentina is not the only person whose maybe many myriads of roles and responsibilities and perspectives are being expressed in this film. We also have the many roles and responsibilities and perspectives of this other character, Nadia. This is the Nina Ruslanova character, also being expressed, because when Nadia emerges, first we, as I say, from Valentina's perspective, we think that Nadia is acting out one particular role. But as the film progresses and jumps from from different spaces to different times, etc., we understand that Nadia herself has her own various roles and agendas. From, say, her place or her experiences in terms of country life and city urban life, in terms of her place vis-a-vis when we see her a little bit later in a different time or maybe flashback structure. We see where she comes from and where she was working in a type of rural setting, in cafe, restaurant, establishment. And there she meets a man that she is very taken with immediately. And this is Maxime. And we realize that her infatuation and almost obsession with Maxime leads her through some set of circumstances from this country or rural setting to the city locale because not just in terms of the fractal nature and almost the sort of wonderful cinematic dissonance that I think is on display in terms of the way this film jumps and shifts from time and space. There's also this interesting counterpunctual or counterbalance aspect of the film. On the one hand, it's very dissonant, but also it's very consonant because there are connections that are being had, and these are revealed early on as well, in terms of Maxime being the man that Nadia was very much infatuated with, that she encountered one time in this rural setting. But we also understand that Maxime is indeed the man in Valentina's life and the relationship that she has. And so that is maybe the plot impetus, perhaps, in bringing Nadia and Valentina into each other's mutual orbits, as it were. And this sets the stage for what might on the surface, or might in one surface in this multi-surfaced film, in one surface to be a type of setting up of a love triangle melodrama. And in many ways, this film, Brief Encounters, I think could be described as a melodrama, maybe a melodrama love triangle film with the three main characters at its center focus. I think that that's one great reading of this film. But another potential great reading of this film is the way in which maybe these different characters, and specifically Nadia and Valentina, these two women who are from seemingly different walks of life and different stations in life, and perhaps even different. Uh, uh, Maybe rural versus urban backgrounds, and also different, say, class standings, even, or standings that are have the basis in class and also culture and language, even uh, are able to come together, maybe under these specific plot point circumstances, but they are still able to come together, and their ability, or the Kira Muratova cinematic expressions of their lives, again in this fragmented type of way, jumping from space to space and time, and seemingly zigzagging in sort of a zigzag chronological order, chronological disorder, and also zigzagging between and among the various characters. We come to realize of the certain similarities and differences, the consonant nature and the dissonant nature that seems to be intertwining their stories, and perhaps their stories are perhaps more unified than what might be meets the eye upon initial opening of this film, Brief Encounters, excuse me. There's also this deeply personal way in which their psychological or emotional feelings, or the psychological portraits or emotional feelings, are being expressed in this fragmented way. They are human beings with multiple perspectives on the same subject, or the same area, the same feeling. They can have different modes. They can be different people at different times, and that's not a knock against them. That's, I think, a very, natural reflection of human nature. People act in a certain way depending on the company that they keep, or the people that they are around at a given moment in time, and that's also true of certain expectations that have a professional skew or a professional connection. That's true of Nadia and what she is expected of her versus who she is underneath, and the various viewpoints that might themselves be both simultaneous and contradictory at the same time. Think about her when she is in these domestic settings, in the household of Valentina, how what we understand is her feeling on the inside versus what it is expected for externally, and how those two points are very potentially contradictory, especially when we understand the deep rooted feeling that she has for Maxime, and how that must affect, or how we can assume that might affect, her feelings and her viewpoint towards Valentina, and also Valentina, how much she might know or not know uh, of the circumstances involved with Maxime, and also how we are introduced to Maxime. Are we introduced to Maxime in the quote unquote present tense, or are we introduced to him in these past tense type of fragments that are also interspersed throughout the dialogues and the structure of this film, and how that too plays an important and very potent part of perception. This idea of time and memory, that's also very much intertwined in each of the stories of the two main protagonists, Nadia and Valentina's stories, respectively. Not just is not only are there passionate feelings, and their feelings of, say, external and internal contradictions, and maybe the expectations that are imposed upon them versus what it is they are feeling, how those are being expressed in a very vivid and wonderful, challenging zigzag manner, and it's brilliantly zigzag, and the uh, in this fragmented collage way by Kira Muratova, but also how time jumps are occurring, and not just perspective jumps, but time jumps. We go from different time points to different time points. Sometimes we start at one point and we go forward, or we go back in time, we go back to the present, we go back, and sometimes we take a jump with a different character. And then sometimes we see the scene and we have this multi-perspective, say, mindset already established by the opening moments of the film. And then we can see certain scenes of Brief Encounters where we see many characters inhabit the same space in the same scene, but we can understand that each person has their own feelings and agendas that might be totally clashing, but it doesn't quite reveal itself, or does it, as the scene progresses. So we have this incredible, potentially volatile mix of emotions, but also very deeply satisfying and innately reflective of human nature and a quality of human nature that I think is very resonant and very believable and very down to earth, but also very, very emotionally intense, and not shying away from, again, a different fractal and different fragmented, say, expectations. It's also reflected so nicely in the cinematic expression of Muratova here. Um, and also there is and we'll maybe get to it a little bit later in the supplements, but the expectations of gender roles in society, and how this falls in sort of the mid to late 1960s contemporary Soviet Union era. This idea, on the one hand, of a quote unquote feminism and liberation on the one hand, and perhaps equality of gender roles and expectations on the one hand, but also perhaps how the quote unquote equality, gender equality, may or may not find full fruition in the circumstances that are part of the daily lives of characters like Valentina and Nadia, respectively. And so it comes into question a type of maybe nuance, or probably subtle, or perhaps not so subtle, and perhaps quite robustly direct discussion of or political critique, and also social economic critique, and of gender roles in society, and how maybe the idealized notion of certain gender roles in society may or may not be finding actual fruition. Case in point, the lives of Nadia and Valentina as they are finding expression in the film Brief Encounters by Kira Muratova. So for these and other reasons, this film, Brief Encounters, is an extraordinary work of art. It is so clever. I mean, some of you hook on to the details as well. Like, for instance, when one character is fiddling around with a clock, and it's an interesting reminder of time, and how time seems to be this tactile thing, but also this ever-present thing, but also this ethereal thing that just is something about it is so inscrutable. And also details too about maybe feelings of boredom, of necessity, of a kind of external imposed will. Things like how a pencil or a writing instrument is it's standing on its head. Notions of dishes in the sink. The way in which a character puts a tablecloth on the table. The way that one character looks to another character. A guitar, music. This is also very important as well, as a type of maybe a reflection of a type of cultural revolutionary or counter-revolutionary spirit, that's maybe reflective too of the deeply involved experimental nature, that's bold and inventive in telling its story, a creative way of it telling its story. So there is so much here in terms of kind of artistic of a type of artistic endeavor that is very, very satisfying, and doesn't yield its answers very easily. But that's not a knock against the film. That's indeed quite a positive take on the film, I think. So it means that it invites you to wonder about the various perspectives, and invites you to engage with each of the characters, and perhaps primarily, as I mentioned, our trio of characters, but perhaps primarily our two main female protagonists. And again, their maybe potentially dueling or maybe seemingly contradictory perspectives might reach some kind of critical mass point, maybe not, at some point of the film, or there might be some kind of critical mass point that is truly internal, that might be a reflection of their internal life or lives, and their roles and their stations. And all the while, always imaginative, and always very wonderfully poetic, and also always very much true to form in terms of the lives of these characters. So this is the brilliant film from Kira Muratova, which is Brief Encounters.